Good day. Good to be back with you. I want to briefly address the importance of Sigmund Freud. Uh, we've talked about in the other videos and in class and elsewhere about the significance of Wilhelm Wundt, at least an introduction to psychology. And since you're taking this class, you've already had that. So you probably remember him as being considered the father of modern day psychology, which he is. But there's another important figure that you're familiar with as well. That's Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud is a misunderstood, iconic, uh, heavy duty hitter in the world of psychology, as you should know. The creator of psychoanalysis and psychodynamic theory, psychotherapy, any of the psychos that you're familiar with. That's Sigmund Freud. I want to talk to you, though, about one particular aspect of his um, theory that includes an explanation of the id, the ego, and the superego. Stuff that, again, uh, you had an intro. So this shouldn't be foreign territory to you. But I'm going to give you a different perspective of this, particularly with the unconscious. So let's begin with the basics. What is this stuff? Id, ego, superego, so on and so forth. Well, we have to remember that Freud defined things as where they occurred. And he had three areas of interest: the conscious, which is what you're keenly aware of, what's going around you, what you're doing right now, and then the preconscious, which shouldn't be confused with the subconscious. The preconscious is that layer of consciousness just below consciousness where you can pluck things out of and use those. Memories, for example, uh, anything related to something that you aren't currently actively using, but it's readily available. And then the unconscious. And the unconscious is the weird one because according to the old theory, you're not even aware that you have an unconscious. We know that there's no such thing as a brain structure where the unconscious lives. It's kind of a concept, basically. And for Freud, it was more than that. Freud viewed it as actually being in existence. Things lived there that you weren't aware of, but they got put there by your experiences. Kind of an odd thing, but it did. So let's look at the id first. Where's the id? The id is in the unconscious. The id functions from a principle called the pleasure principle. Simply put, it's an irrational, instinctual urge for instant gratification without any regard for moral values or practicality or reality. It just says, I want it and I want it right now, boom, and I'm going after it. That's what the id does. That's the kind of drive it is. It has no time dimension. Uh, it doesn't function in the realm of reality. So the pleasure principle, an irrational way to function. If that were left unchecked, we would all be running around like madmen out here doing what we want to do. But we have this traffic cop, so to speak, the ego. The ego lives in the conscious. The id is in the unconscious. The ego is in the conscious and sometimes in the preconscious. The ego's job is to control the id. The ego doesn't want the id to do these pleasurable things without some consideration of the reality of the action that the id is wanting you to take. So what the ego does is it tries to make you deal in reality. And the principle associated with that is the reality principle. Very simple. It's a metering mechanism. It's a way to control this uncontrollable id, so to speak. And then finally, the third item, the superego. The superego basically lives in all three areas, depending on the literature that you read. The areas being conscious, preconscious, unconscious. A lot of people assign it to the realm of conscious until it's not needed or not wanted, and then it's shoved into the unconscious. It just depends on the theorist that you're reading in relationship to the superego. But what is it? Well, it actually is assigned to what's called the morality principle. And the morality principle basically means that you've been taught morals. You have moral values that are instilled in you basically from your parents. And this is strictly Freudian psychology. This is your this is your conscience. This is your guilt trip. When you do something that you know you shouldn't have done, then the superego says, aha, I caught you. And it makes you feel bad about what you did. You've broken the rules. You've committed a taboo behavior, or whatever it is you've done that's not acceptable. So these three items work together and in these three places to basically produce what he called your personality, your way of behaving, your pattern of behavior. Now, if it was that simple, we could leave it alone and move on from there, but it's not, because what happens when we do something goofy, when we do something that we know we shouldn't have done because the superego points its finger at us and goes, no, 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 shouldn't have done that, then we try to make excuses. Freud's view of that was called defense mechanisms. And these will sound familiar to you. The id, ego, and superego may not be as familiar, but what I'm about to tell you about now is, because you do it. We all do it. We find reasons to justify what we've done when we know we shouldn't have done them anyway. But he has a list. And again, depending on what theory you read about related to psychoanalytic, psychodynamic theory, there can be as many as 9 of these things. I'm only going to talk about a few of those. And let's begin with what's known as repression. Repression is an archaic view. Repression is motivated forgetting. It's your attempt. Well, let me back up. It's your unconscious's attempt to remove awareness from threatening impulses or ideas or memories. We have a modern version of that. It's called suppression. Repression is Freudian. It's not really accepted in modern science. We have a control over our activities, depending. And so when we do something that we really wish we hadn't done, or something ugly happens, or whatever the case is, something that takes away your mental well-being, then we have this mechanism called suppression. And it's exactly what it says. I suppress this memory or this activity somewhere deep into my long-term memory where I don't have to deal with it anymore. Yet it's still there. Repression is much the same thing, only Freud would say it's automatic, that this is a protective thing that your unconscious does. And again, that's controversial. The second one that I want to talk about related to that is denial. And this should be familiar. Motivated negation, sometimes it's called. Blocking of external events. Blocking of information from awareness. Somebody tells you that you have a terminal disease, and you go through the denial process. Nah, you got my chart mixed up with someone else's, or whatever you come up with to deny what it is. An alcoholic saying, no, I'm not an alcoholic. I just like to drink a lot of beer because I like the taste of beer. Well, those are denials. I'm not addicted to cocaine. I've been doing it 20 years and I can walk away any day. That would be denial. That doesn't work. So denial should be familiar. Not that all of you are drug addicts. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that there are activities, again, that or occurrences or situations that aren't comfortable. So we use denial to try to deal with those. Displacement is a channeling process. We want to redirect impulses. We channel impulses, usually aggressive impulses, into a different or onto a different target. So you get yelled at by your boss at work and you go home. You can't yell back at your boss, so you won't have one anymore because you got fired. So you go home and you yell at your kids or your wife or your dog or whatever the case is. That's known as displacement. That's very common. Taking out your anger on someone else is a simplistic way of saying that. Sublimation um, is the transforming of an impulse into a more socially acceptable form of behavior. You've heard it said a different way. Sublimation's, by the way, a little bit different than the word I'm going to give you now, and that word is rationalize. We tend to rationalize behaviors. Well, yeah, I'm doing 20 over the speed limit, but so is everybody else. That's rationalization, and it comes in a million and different forms. Sublimation is very similar to that. It's a transforming of an impulse. In other words, I'm making it okay. I want what I did to be socially acceptable. So I'm going to kind of twist and turn a little bit with this, with the facts of this, make it look like it's okay. And then finally, regression. This is really a backing up of behavior. You get angry about something and you slam something down on the floor. So you're 30 years old and you stomp around like you're 11. That's what Freud called regression, childlike behavior done by an adult. What is maturity? That's age appropriate behavior, culturally guided. What is immaturity? That's age inappropriate behavior. So it doesn't match up to what culture expects of you at that age, and that's what regression kind of indicates. I'm acting like a 10-year-old and I'm going on 40 because the situation has made me angry. My football team lost and I'm having a cussing fit. So these are all components of your consciousness, unconscious, and your preconscious, all those things that are Freudian. And what's the point of all of this? We're talking about counseling and psychotherapy, right? Class is about counseling and psychotherapy and the differences, etc. How is it used, so on and so forth. Counselors don't worry too much about, and you've heard this from me, we don't worry too much about your distant past. It's not what's important. What's important for us right now is what's going on right now. So the psychotherapeutic aspect of psychology, the psychoanalysis aspect of psychology is a little watered down. We don't get that involved in what happened to you when you were 12 years old and now you're 45 years old and you're having problems. If you relate an experience to me as a counselor, then I may include that in my analysis of your situation, but I'm not going to dwell on it. I want to know what troubles you're having at the moment. And saying watered down is not an ugly way of classifying counseling. It's letting you know that it's not as in depth a type of mental health help as psychoanalysis is. It's not needed. You didn't come to me for that. You came to me to be a counselor for you. Counseling is involved in talking back and forth. You're a client, much the same as if you went to a psychotherapist, only not so in depth. So a little short and sweet, but I hope you get something out of this. Be sure and watch this. It's a little late in the week. There are activities going on that I've been involved with syllabi. There's another semester starting, so those are my excuses. Hope you accept them. Have a great one.